It started, as most things do, with Dad. Robert Miller. He built Heritage Textiles from a single loom in our garage to a name synonymous with quality custom fabrics. For 40 years, he was the sun around which our family and our business revolved. Then, one Tuesday morning, over lukewarm coffee in the office kitchen, he announced he was stepping down. Not retiring, not selling, just stepping down from day-to-day operations. He'd be chairman, he said, a guiding hand. But the CEO role, the real power, was up for grabs. That's when the trouble began. There were 3 of us, me, Alex, the eldest. I'd been in operations for 15 years, knew every thread count, every die lot, every machine hum. I'd worked my way up, learned from the ground floor. I felt it was my turn, my right. Then there was Sarah, my older sister. She's a force of nature, always has been. She'd built our marketing department from scratch, expanded our client base tenfold. She saw the future in digital, in branding, in reaching new markets. She believed the business needed a fresh face, a modern vision. And finally, Mark, the youngest. He'd gone off to Silicon Valley, made a name for himself in some tech startup, then sold it for a tidy sum. He'd only been back for 2 years, brought in by Dad to modernize our systems. Mark saw everything through the lens of efficiency, automation, disruption. He thought our traditional methods were quaint, but ultimately, a bottleneck. Dad didn't pick. He just said, "You 3 figure it out. The business needs a leader, not 3 squabbling children." He gave us 6 months. 6 months to prove ourselves, to come to a consensus, or he'd consider other options. That last part hung in the air like a threat. The first few weeks were a farce. We tried to be civil. We held leadership meetings in the main conference room. Sarah would present her vision for a complete brand overhaul, a new website, an aggressive social media campaign. I'd counter with the need to invest in new machinery for our core production line, to improve efficiency and maintain our quality edge. Mark would interrupt, talking about AI-driven inventory management, predictive analytics for sales, and outsourcing our dyeing process to a cheaper facility overseas. Outsourcing our dyeing? I remember shouting. Mark, that's our signature. That's what makes Heritage Textiles Heritage Textiles. We control the quality from fiber to finish. Alex, it's about cost effectiveness, he'd retort, calm as ever, which always infuriated me more. We can maintain quality control with strict contracts. Think of the margins. Sarah would try to mediate, guys, we need to find common ground. We all want the business to succeed. But even her attempts felt like thinly veiled maneuvers to push her own agenda. She'd suggest a phased approach that always seemed to start with her marketing initiatives. The employees felt it. You could see it in their eyes. They'd been loyal to Dad, to the company. Now they saw us, the next generation, tearing it apart. Morale dipped. Whispers started in the break room. People began to worry about their jobs. Our first real crisis hit when a major client, a high-end interior design firm we'd worked with for 20 years, threatened to pull their next big order. They'd heard the rumors, seen the internal instability. They wanted assurances of consistent quality and timely delivery. This is because of your ridiculous talk of outsourcing, Mark. I accused him in another heated meeting. They think we're going to compromise our standards. And your refusal to innovate, Alex, makes us look stagnant. Sarah shot back. They want to see a company that's moving forward, not stuck in the past. Mark just sat there, tapping on his tablet. Perhaps we should just let them go. They're a legacy client, high maintenance, low margin. Low margin? I exploded. They're our anchor. They bring in other clients. They're the reason we have a reputation. Dad, who was supposed to be stepping down, had to intervene. He called the client himself, smoothed things over, promised them personally that Heritage Textiles would deliver. It was a humiliating moment for all of us. We were supposed to be taking over, and Dad was still cleaning up our messes. The 6 months turned into a battleground. Every decision, no matter how small, became a power struggle. Should we invest in a new ERP system? Mark said yes, immediately. I said we needed to upgrade our looms first. Sarah said we needed to allocate those funds to a new digital ad campaign. We couldn't even agree on the color of the new office chairs. One afternoon, Mark, without consulting anyone, decided to implement a new lean manufacturing protocol in the finishing department. He'd read about it in some business journal. He cut staff, rearranged workflows, and introduced a new software system that was supposed to track every single movement. The result? Chaos. Orders were delayed, quality checks were missed, and our most experienced finishing supervisor, a man who'd been with us since before I was born, walked out. He said he couldn't work in a place where common sense was replaced by algorithms. That was the breaking point for me. I found Mark in his office, staring at his multiple monitors. "What the hell were you thinking?" I demanded, slamming my hand on his desk. He looked up, annoyed. "I was thinking about efficiency, Alex. Something you clearly don't understand. You just alienated our best people. You jeopardized our reputation. You think you can just waltz in here with your tech jargon and dismantle everything Dad built? Everything Dad built is old, Alex. It's slow. It's inefficient. We need to adapt or die." Sarah walked in then, drawn by the shouting. "What's going on now? Your brilliant brother just drove away our finishing supervisor," I yelled. "And your stubborn refusal to change is driving away our future," Mark retorted. Sarah threw her hands up. "This is ridiculous. We're destroying the company. We're destroying the family." She was right. We were. Dad called us into his office later that week. He looked tired, older than his years. "I gave you 6 months," he said, his voice low and steady. "You've had 7. And what have you accomplished? You've driven away a key employee, alienated a major client, and brought morale to an all-time low. Heritage Textiles is bleeding, and you 3 are holding the knives." He paused, looking at each of us. "I had hoped you would find a way to work together, to combine your strengths. Instead, you've chosen to fight for control, to prove who's right. Well, you're all wrong." Then came the random, unexpected twist. Dad pulled out a folder. "I've been talking to a private equity firm. They're interested in acquiring a majority stake." My stomach dropped. Sarah gasped. Mark, for once, looked genuinely shocked. "Acquire? Dad, you can't." I stammered. "This is our family business." "It was our family business," he corrected, his voice hard. "Now it's a battleground. They've offered a fair price. Enough for all of you to walk away wealthy, and for me to know the business will survive, even if it's not under our full control." But what about our legacy?" Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Legacy means nothing if the business collapses," Dad said, his gaze unwavering. "They want an answer by the end of the month. If you 3 can't present a unified, viable leadership plan by then, one that I approve of, then I'm selling." That was it. The ultimate threat. The thought of losing Heritage Textiles, not just to one of my siblings, but to an outside entity, was a cold, hard slap in the face. It wasn't about who was right anymore. It was about survival. We left Dad's office in stunned silence. For the first time, there was no shouting, no accusations. Just the heavy weight of what we were about to lose. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the empty factory floor, the silent looms, the stacks of fabric. Every corner held a memory. Dad teaching me how to operate the first automated loom. Sarah sketching designs for a new collection. Mark, as a kid, trying to program the old punch card machines. This wasn't just a business, It was our history, our identity. The next morning, Sarah called me. "Alex," she said, her voice unusually subdued. Can we talk? Just us?" We met at a small diner, away from the office. No power suits, no corporate jargon. Just coffee and the realization that we were about to lose everything. "He's serious, isn't he?" Sarah asked, stirring her coffee. "Dead serious," I confirmed. "And honestly, can you blame him? We've been a disaster." "I know," she admitted, looking down. I wanted to prove myself. To show I could lead." "Me too," I said. "I thought it was my birthright, after all these years." "And Mark," she continued, "he just wants to make his mark, to show he's not just the kid who went off and made money, but that he can contribute here too." We sat in silence for a moment, the truth of it hanging between us. We weren't fighting for the business, we were fighting for Dad's approval, for our own egos. "What do we do?" Sarah finally asked. "We stop fighting," I said. "We figure out how to make this work. Together." We spent the next few days talking, really talking, for the first time in months. We brought Mark into it, reluctantly at first, but he eventually came around. We laid out our individual strengths, our weaknesses, our fears. I was good at operations, at maintaining quality, at understanding the core product. But I was resistant to change, slow to adapt. Sarah was brilliant at marketing, at client relations, at seeing the bigger picture for the brand. But she sometimes lacked the operational understanding, the nitty-gritty of production. Mark was a visionary when it came to technology, efficiency, and new markets. But he was impatient, sometimes reckless, and lacked the deep understanding of our traditional craft. It was Sarah who finally articulated it. "We're not meant to be one leader. We're meant to be a team. A triumvirate." "A triumvirate?" Mark scoffed. "That sounds like a recipe for more arguments." "No," I countered, "not if we define our roles clearly. Not if we trust each other." We spent the next 2 weeks hammering out a plan. It was brutal. There were still arguments, still disagreements, but this time, they were constructive. We were arguing for the business, not against each other. The plan we presented to Dad was comprehensive. I would be Chief Operating Officer, overseeing production, quality control, and supply chain. Sarah would be Chief Marketing Officer, responsible for brand strategy, sales, and client relations. Mark would be Chief Innovation Officer, tasked with exploring new technologies, product diversification, and market expansion. But the biggest change was the CEO role. We proposed an interim CEO, an experienced industry veteran, someone external, who could guide us through the transition, mentor us, and ensure we stuck to our defined roles. We even had a candidate in mind, an old colleague of Dad's, a man named Arthur Vance, who had recently retired from a rival textile company. He was respected, fair, and knew the industry inside out. Dad listened, his face unreadable. He asked tough questions, poked holes in our plan, challenged our assumptions. But we had answers. We had thought it through. We had compromised. We had learned to listen to each other. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. A small smile played on his lips. "So, you're telling me you've finally grown up?" "We're trying, Dad," I said, a lump in my throat. "We realize the business is bigger than any one of us," Sarah added. "And that our individual strengths are only truly powerful when combined," Mark finished. Dad nodded slowly. "Arthur Vance, eh? He's a good man. A tough negotiator, but fair." He looked at each of us, his eyes softening. "All right. I'll call Arthur. And I'll tell the private equity firm that Heritage Textiles is not for sale. Not yet, anyway." The relief that washed over us was immense. We had pulled it back from the brink. The transition wasn't easy. Arthur Vance was indeed tough, but he was also a brilliant mentor. He forced us to communicate, to respect boundaries, to make decisions collectively. There were still moments of friction, old habits dying hard, but the stakes were too high to revert to our old ways. I learned to appreciate Sarah's vision for the brand, how a strong market presence could drive demand for our quality products. I learned to see the value in Mark's technological innovations, how automation could free up our skilled artisans to focus on truly custom, high-value work, rather than repetitive tasks. And they, in turn, learned to respect the foundational importance of quality production and the heritage that gave our brand its soul. The arguments didn't completely disappear, but they transformed. They became debates, discussions, negotiations. We learned to challenge ideas, not people. We learned that compromise wasn't weakness, but a path to stronger solutions. Heritage Textiles is thriving now. We've launched a successful e-commerce platform, expanded into new international markets, and even introduced a line of sustainable, tech-infused fabrics that Mark spearheaded. Our core custom fabric business remains strong, a testament to the quality I always championed. Dad still comes in, sometimes. He sits in his chairman's office, watches us work, and occasionally offers a cryptic piece of advice. He looks younger now, lighter. He sees his children not as squabbling rivals, but as a functional, albeit sometimes messy, team. The succession crisis nearly destroyed us, nearly cost us everything. But in the end, it forced us to confront our egos, to truly see each other, and to realize that the family business wasn't just about who was in charge, but about the collective strength of the family itself. All arguments closed, not because we agreed on everything, but because we finally agreed on how to disagree, and how to move forward, together.